Welcome to A.D Horror Show. A story of a taxi driver. Taxi driver's heart pounded in their chest as they stared at the empty seat. Goosebumps prickled their skin, and a cold sweat broke out on their forehead. They had heard stories of haunted places, but they never thought they would be the ones to pick up a ghostly passenger. With trembling hands, the driver pulled over to the side of the road, trying to make sense of what had just happened. They checked the back seat, but it was undeniably empty. There was no trace of the mysterious passenger, not even a scrap of the tattered clothing they had been wearing. Fear gnawed at the driver's mind as they contemplated their next move. Should they flee the taxi and run away? Or should they stay and investigate? Curiosity and dread warred within them, but ultimately, they decided to gather their courage and confront the eerie presence that had just vanished. The driver cautiously stepped out of the car, the rain soaking them to the bone. They hesitated for a moment before approaching the abandoned house from which the ghostly passenger had emerged. It loomed before them, a decrepit structure with windows that stared like vacant eyes into the night. As they neared the house, strange, ethereal whispers filled the air, carried by the howling wind. The driver couldn't make out the words, but the ghostly voices sent shivers down their spine. They entered the house, guided only by the pale light of the moon filtering through the broken windows. Inside, the air was heavy with a sense of foreboding, and the driver's footsteps echoed ominously. They followed the ghostly whispers to a room at the end of the hallway, where they found an old, dusty mirror. The driver's own reflection stared back at them, but something was different. A ghostly figure stood behind them in the reflection, its tattered clothes billowing in a phantom wind. The driver's heart raced as they turned around, but there was no one there. The ghostly passenger had reappeared, its face still hidden. It whispered once more, this time with an agonized tone, "Help me find peace." With a newfound determination, the driver realized they were bound to this ghostly soul. They vowed to uncover the mystery surrounding the passenger's restless spirit and help it find the peace it sought, embarking on a chilling journey into the unknown as the storm raged on outside, and the secrets of the abandoned house slowly unveiled themselves. The driver's heart raced as they stared at the empty passenger seat, their eyes wide with terror. The hitchhiker, who had been sitting beside them only moments ago, was now gone, leaving behind a chilling void in the car. The driver knew they had witnessed something otherworldly, something that defied explanation. Shaken to the core, they pulled the car to the side of the desolate highway, their hands trembling on the steering wheel. They replayed the conversation they had had with the hitchhiker in their mind, trying to make sense of the bizarre encounter. The hitchhiker had initially seemed like any other traveler, casually sharing stories about their life and journey. However, as the miles passed, the stories took a sinister turn. They spoke of darkness, betrayal, and revenge, their voice growing colder and more menacing with each passing word. The driver had initially dismissed it as a strange sense of humor, but now they couldn't shake the feeling that they had encountered something malevolent. As the driver sat in their car, grappling with fear and confusion, they noticed a faint, ominous whispering filling the air. It was as if 1,000 voices were murmuring in unison, and the sound seemed to be coming from all around them. Panic welled up inside the driver as they realized they were not alone on the highway. The shadows outside the car began to shift and coalesce, forming a shape that resembled the hitchhiker. The grotesque mask returned, contorting their features into a nightmarish visage of rage and torment. The driver's heart pounded in their chest as they watched the vengeful spirit approach the car, its hollow eyes fixed upon them. With trembling hands, the driver fumbled for the car keys, desperate to escape the nightmarish apparition that had materialized before them. They turned the ignition, but the engine sputtered and died, as if refusing to obey their commands. The whispering voices grew louder, drowning out all rational thought. In a final act of desperation, the driver flung open the car door and fled into the darkness, their footsteps echoing on the deserted highway. The vengeful spirit pursued them relentlessly, its nightmarish form shifting and contorting as it closed in. As the driver ran, they could feel the malevolent presence drawing closer, its icy breath on their neck. It was a race against time, a battle between mortal terror and supernatural vengeance. They knew they could never truly escape the haunting memory of that nightmarish encounter, forever haunted by the hitchhiker who had become a vengeful specter on the desolate highway. As the rideshare driver's car idled at the entrance to the dense forest, they couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of unease. The forest was cloaked in darkness, the trees appearing as twisted, skeletal figures against the dim moonlight. They glanced at the passenger, who had remained eerily silent since the start of the journey. "Is this the right place?" the driver asked, their voice quivering. The passenger nodded slowly, their face obscured by shadows. With a heavy heart, the driver began to navigate the narrow, winding path into the heart of the forest. The silence inside the car was oppressive, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves and the driver's nervous breaths. They couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. After what felt like an eternity, they arrived at the address provided by the passenger. It was a dilapidated cabin, barely visible in the darkness. The passenger got out of the car without a word and approached the cabin, disappearing into its shadowy interior. As the driver watched the passenger vanish into the cabin, a sense of dread washed over them. They knew they needed to leave this eerie place, but when they turned the car around and tried to drive back down the forest path, they found themselves facing an impenetrable wall of trees. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped in an endless loop, unable to escape the haunted woods. Desperation gave way to fear as the driver repeatedly attempted to find a way out, but no matter which path they took, they always ended up back at the same cabin. The forest seemed to mock their efforts, twisting and turning in on itself as if it had a malevolent will of its own. Hours turned into days, and the driver's exhaustion and terror grew with each fruitless attempt to escape. They tried to communicate with the passenger, but the mysterious figure remained silent, never revealing their intentions or the reason behind this nightmarish journey. As days turned into weeks, the driver's sanity began to fray. They no longer knew if it was day or night, and the forest had become a surreal, ever-shifting nightmare. They felt as if they were trapped in a ghostly, endless purgatory, forever condemned to drive through the haunted woods. In the eerie stillness of the forest, the driver began to hear whispers, faint and indistinct, like the voices of lost souls. Shadows moved among the trees, and strange apparitions appeared on the road ahead, all of them beckoning the driver further into the heart of the forest. The rideshare driver had unwittingly become a prisoner of the supernatural, ensnared in a never-ending nightmare where escape seemed impossible. As they continued to navigate the haunted woods, they could only wonder if they would ever uncover the truth behind their strange passenger and the cursed journey that had become their fate. The taxi driver's hands trembled on the steering wheel as they stared at the empty back seat. The unsettling passenger, dressed in archaic clothing, had vanished into thin air. The fog outside seemed to thicken, pressing against the windows of the cab like a shroud of darkness. Frantic, the driver scoured every inch of the car, hoping for some logical explanation. But there was nothing. The back seat was empty, and the chilling tales of unsolved murders the passenger had been recounting were now nothing but echoes in their mind. With a racing heart, the driver decided to pull over to the side of the desolate road. They needed to make sense of this surreal and terrifying experience. As they reached over to turn on the overhead light, their eyes fell on something unexpected, an old, yellowed newspaper resting on the back seat. The front page was filled with headlines about the very murders the passenger had been describing in detail. The taxi driver's pulse quickened as they read the articles. These crimes had occurred decades ago, and the cases had remained unsolved, shrouded in mystery. The realization sent a shiver down their spine. They had given a ride to the restless spirit of one of the murder victims, and this ghostly presence was now forever bound to their cab. With trembling hands, the driver picked up the newspaper and examined the haunting photographs of the victims. In the rearview mirror, they saw a faint, ethereal figure begin to materialize in the back seat. It was the passenger, their spectral form taking shape, still dressed in the same old-fashioned attire. The ghostly passenger turned to the driver, their eyes filled with an otherworldly sadness and longing. They seemed to be silently pleading for something, but the driver couldn't comprehend their message. Over the following nights, the driver's life descended into a terrifying ordeal. The ghostly passenger would materialize in the back seat, sharing more about the unsolved murders and the anguish they had endured in life. The taxi became a conduit for the tormented spirit stories, as if it sought solace in recounting the gruesome tales to a living soul. Haunted by this spectral presence, the taxi driver decided to investigate the cold cases. With each revelation, they brought closure to the victims' families and helped the restless spirit find peace. But as they delved deeper into the mysteries, they also uncovered a dark secret that connected the murders to a hidden, malevolent force that sought to ensnare their own soul. As the taxi driver continued their journey into the unknown, they realized that they were not just bound to the ghostly passenger but to the chilling mysteries of the past and the malevolent entity that threatened their very existence. They were trapped in a web of horror, with no escape in sight, and their fate intertwined with the restless spirits and the secrets of the foggy, haunted night. The truck driver's heart pounded in their chest as they continued to navigate the never-ending tunnel. Time seemed to stretch and warp, making it impossible to gauge how long they had been inside. The walls of the tunnel, once distant and foreboding, now pressed in on them, narrowing the path with each passing moment. Panic surged as the driver's attempts to turn around or find an emergency exit proved futile. The tunnel had become an inescapable labyrinth, a nightmare of concrete and darkness. The truck's headlights pierced the inky void, revealing eerie shapes and shadows that seemed to move and shift on their own. As the driver's desperation grew, they began to hear unsettling sounds echoing through the tunnel's expanse. Whispers of voices, distant screams, and the eerie laughter of children filled the air, bouncing off the walls and reverberating inside the truck's cab. Each sound sent shivers down their spine, and they couldn't shake the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. Exhaustion and fear took their toll, and the driver's mind started to play tricks on them. They began to see ghostly apparitions outside the truck's windows, figures with hollow eyes and twisted features that beckoned them further into the abyss. The driver knew they had entered a place where the laws of reality no longer applied, and the tunnel had become a portal to an otherworldly realm. Hours turned into days, or perhaps it was longer. The driver had lost all sense of time. They continued to drive, searching for any glimmer of hope, but the endless loop of the tunnel showed no mercy. It was as if the tunnel itself had become a malevolent entity, determined to keep them trapped in its nightmarish embrace. Just when the driver felt they could take no more, a blinding light appeared at the far end of the tunnel. They squinted against the sudden brilliance, their hopes rekindled. Maybe this was their chance to escape the relentless cycle. With trembling hands, they accelerated toward the light, the truck's engine roaring. But as they neared the source of illumination, dread washed over them. It was not an exit, it was a blinding, white void, an abyss that swallowed them whole. They had fallen into the tunnel's final trap. When they emerged once again on the other side, they found themselves back at the tunnel's entrance, trapped in an eternal loop, reliving the same terrifying journey over and over. The haunted tunnel had become their inescapable prison, a purgatory of endless darkness and despair. As the truck driver continued to drive through the never-ending tunnel, they could only wonder if they were the only one to have fallen victim to this malevolent place, or if others had also been ensnared in its relentless grasp. The road ahead stretched on, a path to nowhere, with no escape and no end in sight. Hope you like the story. For more horror stories, subscribe to our channel.